Apologize for the slight delay, but it's wonderful to see you all this morning. I'm Dave Martin. I run the Center for Applied Innovation here, and I also, in context of this particular gathering, I've been helping set up a number of programs worldwide around technology integration, digitization of all sorts of things, e-government, from the European Union accession programs that we set up back in the 90s to projects on resilience that have spanned the globe, largely in my role at the University of Virginia, where I'm also on the faculty. Today we're going to just take a quick overview of some of the things we're doing in the area of cyber and infrastructure resilience. A new initiative at Melbourne Polytechnic through the Center of Applied Innovation is setting up a financial services and infrastructure resilience program, and we're doing that across an enormous number of industries with a bunch of industry partners as well as a bunch of government partners. And as part of that, we have two different international partnerships that we've really been focusing on. One is really around the business and infrastructure implications of cyber and cybersecurity. The other is to understand a bit more of the human factors. What is it about the human narrative that is driving cyber and cybersecurity and infrastructure resilience the way that potentially, if we think back 30, 40, 50 years, other forms of military and force-based technologies change the landscape of how we thought about geopolitics. And so we thought this morning it would be great to have you exposed to two of our partners. One, who you heard first, Dr. Mark Troutman, after serving in a very distinguished career in the U.S. Army, went to George Mason University and is directing the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Resilience Program, which is a program that serves not only industry but also serves the Department of Homeland Security and a number of the intelligence and defense agencies in the United States, and also give you a bit of a perspective from a very different angle. My dear friend and colleague Denise Baken. Denise also served, both of them retired colonels in the U.S. Army, so I should give them credit where credit is due. Denise served in a number of capacities, including helping flesh out capabilities around biosecurity, both biological and chemical weapons expertise, looking at counterproliferation issues, looking at toxins and biosecurity implications, because in many instances, as some of you are aware, the construct around cybersecurity and infrastructure resilience actually includes the sensitivity of understanding that many times what happens at a disruption level, potentially in a digital system, actually opens up very large risks in the analog world. So there's all kinds of programs that are put in place where you create a disruption, which is really the decoy or the enablement that allows something else to happen. So you take down a water treatment program so that you can introduce something into the water to ultimately have additional effects. So Denise is actually quite savvy, terrifyingly savvy in certain instances, on understanding some of the dynamics around the more human factor orientation. How do we deal with things like weaponization of intrusions and all of the kinds of things that keep a lot of people up at night? But she's also done an enormous job on a personal level of navigating human factors as part of a broader cybernetics and technology examination. One of the things often missing from the conversation of cybersecurity is the human factor. What is it that's creating people to have the intention to do harm? What is it that's motivating people to disrupt systems? What is it that's behind all of those things? What are the human factors? And oftentimes, in conversations around technology, we lose sight of the fact that it's human actors inside of the driving of technology that ultimately create a number of factors that are of great concern. So Denise is going to give us a little window into that. But with no further ado from me, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, David. And thank you all for the invitation to come here today. With great respect to my host, I am going to correct him in terms of his characterization of both myself and my colleague Dr. Baken. I think she agrees with me in refusing to use the R word, even though your characterization of us is correct. Both Denise and I were privileged to serve our nation, but my story, and I'm sticking to it, and I think she would join me in this story, is in my particular case, after 28 years in the United States Army, I finally accumulated enough credits to graduate and graduated to something else, and that I think would be our first message to both of you, in that we both would like to think of ourselves as lifelong learners, and old stuff being learned as new, and the lesson continually to both of us being, in some ways there is no new stuff. It's in a lot of ways old stuff that you encounter in arguably new technological applications. So in both of our cases, a lot of new learning, but a lot of application of privileged learning of old experiences, if you will. Just a little background on who we are and who I am. George Mason University is one of the state universities of my state where I live now, and that's Virginia. We're in the Washington, D.C. area. So if any of you find yourself in the Washington, D.C. area, come on in. A cup of coffee is on us. A cup of American coffee, the big, ginormous ones, okay? And we'll take you on down the road to Charlottesville, which is about 2 hours away. And you can bomb in on Dr. Martin there and see what he does at the University of Virginia. And on the way, we'll bomb in on Denise, because she's about 45 minutes to the west of us. So you've got the Virginia connection here coming in and talking to you. We are in the Washington, D.C. area. We're the largest university in the state of Virginia. We have 36,000 students now, about 14 or so thousand undergrads, and a huge population of adult learners. That happens to be where I got my doctoral degree in economics. That has absolutely no connection with what I'm doing now. But you can see a couple of bullets there about who we are, what we do. We're about 15 years old. As David said, we focus on critical infrastructure protection. That is, if you will, sort of a subset of national security studies that is found in the United States in our Department of Homeland Security, which in itself is a really new organization. I mean, they are so new, they don't even have their own building. Truly, they are just getting their own place. They are literally spread across the Washington, D.C. area. And in regards to what we'll talk about for just a few minutes today, this is a relatively new focus of national security studies, if you will, and I'll put it in context for you. But initially it started out right after the incidents in the United States of 9/11, 2001. If you'll remember, that was an assault on the financial infrastructure of the United States. A couple of malactors got a hold of airplanes, flew them into the World Trade Center. Flew one into the Pentagon, so an assault on the financial infrastructure of the United States and the Defense Department of the United States really got the nation's attention. And as often in these sorts of things, a crisis happens, there's enormous activity, and then people think about it. And that would be my second message to you, is there's an opportunity here to think about it carefully and apply it. But the initial focus on physical security and anti-terrorism, and then as the understanding of these critical functions has matured, and I'll define what I mean by that in just a second, then an understanding into more areas of concern, one of which is what you're engaged in, and that is this relatively new cyber domain, or the ability to control processes in an inter-network sense over computer networks. And what I'll do is illustrate to you some impacts, some foundational principles, and then what I think it means to you in terms of what you're engaged in the pursuit of learning, and then turn it over to Denise, who will talk more about it in terms of the human factors and workforce implications of it. This is a shot out of a report that gets published now about 5 years running by a think tank in the United States called the Ponemon Institute. If any of you are thinking about applications of cybersecurity, this is a great one to read. It gives a very good high-level impact report on the state of crime committed in cybersecurity, which is in the cyberspace, and thus reinforces the importance of security in the cyber domain for both professionals and firms. As I said, this has been published about 5 or 6 years running, and you can see it's a cross-country cross-country survey, and just one immediate message of this survey is that the financial impact of crimes committed in cyberspace. What we mean by crimes is the ability to access the networks of a firm or an organization, extract data, which might be personal in nature, financial in nature, or in some cases, the ability to take over those networks and create physical effects by changing the operation of those networks. The value of that crime is large, and it is increasing. This particular institute took a survey of about 260 firms over 6 countries. And mind you, if you read the fine print on this survey, this is about 260 firms that answered of about 1,700 that they polled. Now let that sink in a second. That's about 260 firms that answered. That's the minority of firms that were willing to share data in this space of what the effects of cybercrime on their operations were. So there's a vast mountain of unreported data out there that if this looks bad, consider that the picture might be even more impactful and more serious because there's all that data that's unreported. You can understand why firms would not want to report the financial impact of crimes committed on their cyber networks. It affects their share prices. It affects their operations. It affects the trust that the public has in the operations and the goods and services that they provide. So there's an enormous amount of crime that is unreported, but you can see in the United States, my home country, well, the biggest impact and increasing at exponential rates. That's an on average, that is an on average firm cost, and that 17.36 is in the millions. Okay, that's the average impact per firm of those firms studied. Now, those of you, any economists in the room? I know Dr. Martin is one. Okay, good. You should all thank yourself that you didn't go into economics because it's the gloomy science, and you throw yourself out of a window. Okay, only truly crazy people go into economics. But there's a lot of statistics in economics, and one of the dynamics that we deal with in that discipline is unreported, the bias of data which is unreported. So you can see that trend, how large it is, how exponentially it is increasing, and then combine that with the observation I made to you just a few moments ago, that the vast majority of firms that were surveyed in this report chose not to answer. So that tells me that that number of $17.4 million per firm is on the low side. So it's probably larger in magnitude, and that increase rate even though it's increasing at about a rate of about 20% per year in the United States, that increase rate is probably larger than what is represented on that slide. So this doesn't affect Australia, right? Wrong. Look at the bottom bars on the slide, and you can see the impact on this country. Large, and the pattern, though maybe not necessarily conclusive, increasing. A second shot, and that is, where does this affect? And it brings to home a little bit, maybe gives a little bit more explanation of the partnership that has been formed here and why it is that we are doing what we are doing. This is a second data pull, if you will, of across those companies. Now they are broken into industrial sectors, and you recognize the names of those. Those are the kind of things that we rely on each day. The financial networks. This is kind of, this is the plastic fantastic, isn't it? And oh, by the way, we finally got smart in the United States. We got chips, right? You guys have had those for a while. We crazy Americans resisted it until about 18 months ago, and finally imposed that protection on ourselves. Sometimes we're not so smart as we think we are. But you can see at the top, in the financial sector, largest impact by far. Why? Very good reason, established by scientific research. Why do people rob banks?
Where the money is.
That's where the money is, okay? And there's a great bit of data to support that. What you see me having X'd there are just, it's a sample of where people live and where their functions are, and juxtaposed against the kind of financial impact in these sectors. First, finances, utilities and energy. You all like having the lights on, right? Okay. That's delivered by your local power company. Look at the financial impact and the magnitude of those flows on that sector. Healthcare, where you get your hospital services from. Retail, another one of those. Transportation, the public sector. Our public sector has been the target of several breaches, and as has the public sector of this country as well. And you can see down the line, which pulls together both my discipline and what we are doing in relationship with the Center of Applied Innovation, and that is we are bringing this home in a very practical sense to where people live, work, and make their livelihoods. And if you go read our national doctrine, if you will, on critical infrastructure protection, critical infrastructure are those industries that deliver the kind of services that allow us to consider our lives as normal. So like I got up this morning, I put some water in a tea kettle, heated it, poured myself a cup of coffee, went downstairs in an elevator, met David on the street. He drove us through the streets of Melbourne, Australia. We stopped when the lights turned red. We went when they told us to, when they turned green, and so on and so on and so on. Sounds pretty normal, right? What would be the impact on my ability to carry out that activity if the power grid were brought down? I would not get here because I would not have been able to use the elevator to get down from my hotel room. Maybe I would have gone down the steps. David would have decided that I had slept in. He'd have left me on the streets. Oh, by the way, the traffic lights, would they have functioned? Don't know. If traffic lights don't function, I know this never happens in your country, but in my country, when the traffic lights go down, the law of the jungle asserts itself, and it's every person for themselves on the roadways. That is critical infrastructure, and in certain cases, if that is disrupted, that has really serious impacts on daily life. If it is compromised, there are certain industries where that can be life and death, vital circumstances. You see some of those listed there. Power grids, transportation networks, as David rightly pointed out, water systems, those sorts of things, communication networks. Those are considered lifeline sectors in both of our countries. I won't go into this too much, and I'll leave these slides with David. This is a key piece of research in another one of those security reports. And the important picture is down to the lower right, that reporting bias, that there is kind of a natural tendency for firms not to report these sorts of cybersecurity incidents because they worry about reputational damage. Well, is this a subject that is applicable to Australia? You betcha. You bet it is. That's out of your National Cybersecurity Report that was published in 2016. This is data from last year. It says that 90% of your firms in Australia suffered an attempted breach. Now, when I say suffered an attempted breach, that means that a hostile party attempted to break into their networks at least once. If you go read through the details of this report, some of these firms were fending off these sort of attacks multiple times a day. That's actually a common experience in both of our countries. Look to the left of that, my right, your left, to the left of that panel. That's the success rate that hackers have had in this country. Not that unusual, but pretty serious. And you saw that report that I showed you earlier of the magnitude of the financial impact of crimes. This is from that same report. This is the places where those breaches have happened, by percentage of industrial sector. And you can see, look at the big pie slots right over there on the right, banking and financial services. My purpose is not to scare the heck out of you this morning, but to bring this to your attention that this is where people live and work in both of our countries. You remember I said that critical infrastructure sectors, they're the places where our lives are normal. This is a very infamous incident in our country. Happened about 3 years ago. One of our major retailers, the Target Corporation. I don't know if they've made it to Australia. I don't think
it's a different Target.
Okay.
The Target here actually misappropriated the Target logo and brand and actually entirely stole the brand for Australia. So there is a Target that looks like Target. It's not Target.
Good on them. Good on them.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done. Okay. Well, this is the Target Corporation in the United States. This is 3 years ago. And I will tell you in this discipline, this is old news now. We developed a case study on this, and you see that's kind of one of the technical pieces of it, but looks pretty complicated. What happened here? Is it? Yes, in technical senses. But in terms of the big moving pieces, and this is where Denise and I are natural collaborators, basically 4 things happened. A hostile party sent a phishing email to key individuals of a subcontractor of the Target Corporation and got them to open it, and they introduced malware into their networks. Okay? Why did they do that? Because they had studied the Target Corporation and they had figured out that one of their subcontractors had direct access to the corporation. And to give you an idea, it was the contractor that handled their heating and air conditioning systems in their buildings, their HVAC systems. They had direct access to Target Corporation network because of the second error, and that is there was kind of not so good security in place in the Target Corporation. Those networks were not separated. So you had a key person whose credentials were compromised, who had direct access to the corporate network. All of this studied by the hostile party, which led to the third element, and that is the ability to get inside the corporate networks and just look around for a long period of time. The report that our cybersecurity, our National Cybersecurity Center did on this particular incident estimates that these criminals were inside this corporation for anywhere to 6 to 9 months. And they chose very carefully then the point at which all of the exploits they put in place when they chose to turn them on. Anybody want to guess when this breach actually happened? Anybody know about this breach? I know this is a U.S. case, but it's very illustrative. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to when this happened?
Christmas Day.
I heard it.
Christmas Day.
Christmas Day, earlier. You're right.
Thanksgiving.
Earlier. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Now, why would you do that?
Busiest time of the year.
It's the busiest time of year for Christmas shopping. Okay? Pretty smart. That's old stuff, right? Why do you rob the banks? Let's review here. You guys didn't know there was going to be a test, did you? Why do you rob the banks? That's where the money is. Okay? In the modern age, where does the money flow between the banks and the retailers? When does the money flow? Between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Why? Because that's when all of us guilty people buy Christmas presents for people, right? I know that's true. And that's when they chose to make their exploits. This happened right after Thanksgiving, which is the largest retail season in the United States, and I think there's probably a similar dynamic in Australia as well. And you can see down at the bottom the magnitude of that breach. At the bottom, $248 million in fraudulent charges, lawsuits, corporate cleanup, all that sort of stuff, and counting. That is going on, and the estimates are this will go on for about 10 years or so before it's finally cleaned up. But that's just a retailer, right? Am I doing okay?
Yeah, about 5 more minutes.
That's just a retailer. Here's another incident that we have observed in this space. This is now about 2 years on. You've probably heard of this one. Just before Christmas in Ukraine, to make this a short presentation, a hostile party was able to break into the power grid. Three power companies within the Ukrainian power. I'm sorry, two power companies. They were able to get inside their networks and take control of 3 substations, which distribute electricity generated at power stations to homes and businesses and college campuses. In this particular case, those attackers chose to shut down those substations and turn off that power grid on December the 23rd. Now, what's going on in December the 23rd in Ukraine?
Winter.
And it's not Christmas. Yes, it's winter. Okay? Definitely intended to send a message. That power grid, substantial portion of the country, about 1/3 of the country's power grid was down for anywhere from about 12 to 36 hours before it was brought back up by manual means. How did this happen? Almost an exact pattern as the target case that I described to you just a few moments ago, compromising key credentials, this time getting inside an industrial control systems network, long reconnaissance, picking of specific targets, and then a choice to act at a time and a place of the attacker's choosing to get the effect that they wanted. How could all of this be prevented? I didn't make this up, those 4 major bullet points on the side. And there you see a schematic of, in this case, how, in very simple senses, how that power grid, how that power company was compromised. Those 4 bullets there was a recent article in our major business paper, the Wall Street Journal, that said, you know, with just those simple steps, the vast majority, some people estimate about 90% or greater of most compromises in cyberspace could be prevented, but they are not. Why are they not? Well, I won't steal any thunder from my colleague, but all of those Those are not high technology solutions. Those are corporate procedure, personal activity on the part of employees, workforces, and aware, a critically thinking, a creatively thinking, and an effective workforce in making sure that these things are prevented. So to segue over to Denise, what we have created in our center is an educational curriculum at the master's degree level that we are beginning to build up and down the educational chain, if you will. And in this sense, this is in the U.S. educational system, but there are crossovers to the educational system in this country. So the question is, does what you are studying in terms of network operations, network security, cyber security, does it all matter? Yes, it does, incredibly. For the reason of those kinds of incidents that I made reference to just a few moments ago. Breaches in cyberspace are hugely expensive. They affect people where they live. In some cases, they can cause incidents that rise to the level of national security concerns. The government of Ukraine called in my government after that incident in the winter of 2015 to help them investigate because they thought it was that serious, because they thought their power grid was at risk. So what you are studying has the potential to make an immense and immediate impact. And back to where I started this, and by means of turning it over to Denise, those of you who are adult learners and who are changing careers, good on you, because it takes the experience from your previous life, which is rich, which is applicable, which is absolutely needed in a creative sense, and it brings it to problems and therefore solutions that make an immediate impact today. And those of you who are just starting out in this field, believe you me, these kinds of incidents, they're just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, I showed you an iceberg in one of my pictures earlier. We live in a connected society that will only get more connected and interconnected. What you are learning will have application for years, decades to come. And I'm going to turn it over now to Denise, who's going to talk to you more in terms of the human domain and educational aspects. So let's do a quick switch, and over to you.
Good morning. As David told you, I spend my life looking at bad guys. And believe it or not, that actually has something to do with cyber. Because one of the things we realized that the bad guys did something that the regular industry, financial, retail, anything else, did not do. They recognized that the best resource they had available to them was the individual at the end of a weapon or at the end of a keyboard. There was a young man. His name was Arabi 007. At least that was the handle he took. He was 21 years old. He decided he needed to do something that helped, that was responsible. Yes, he got on some internet that exposed him to Al-Qaeda. But he felt he would take the education that his father, and this is the part that always bothers me, that his father paid for, and the computer that his mother paid for, and he would help them. They paid him nothing. He proceeded to teach all of the people that he had access to how to break into banks, people's accounts, because he felt if he helped them fund the activities that they did, he was doing something that helped the cause. What Al-Qaeda recognized was that there was some aspect to that resilience, to that infrastructure, to the cyber infrastructure that no one else recognized. The critical piece to it was the human, was the individual at the other end, was the one who pushed the keyboard and made the decision, even though he was only running HVAC, to open a key, to open an MBA. He was the one who said, I know I can do something. So he helped teach young people. So now we're trying to change that. And we're trying to look at that human aspect. One study that was initiated, it was from Nigeria, and what they were trying to do, see, because Applied actually is very good about recognizing the importance of this one element, and it's a mobile element to this infrastructure. It's not like a wall that stays there until you knock it down. You can take your computer and move from point A to point B and still help somebody do whatever it is you want to help them to, as long as they keep you in your head committed to what they have convinced you. So we therefore have to look at that workforce landscape and say, what is driving that workforce? One of the studies, as I mentioned, that we did was to look at, there were young people in Nigeria, and they have a very difficult economic system. And so the study really questioned them and surveyed them to say, who were the employers that they were looking to secure positions with when they graduated. Now, they went to the cream of the crop of their computer classes. The biggest employer, many of them checked to, and it was put down there, was Al-Qaeda. Paid more than anybody else, and gave benefits. Gave a vacation. If they were killed, their families were taken care of. All of this, when if you went down the street to McDonald's, you got $15 an hour, no vacation. And if you got sick, you were on your own. So what we're trying to do is say that human is just as critical as water, as a wall, as a floor. It is fundamental, and it is permanent. In its mobility, it is permanent to any execution of any of the actions that are required by any industry. For cyber, and this is not just for the person who is in an ICT, what they call an ICT position, someone who is programmer, analyst. No, if I am a receptionist, I had better have technical, project management. I have to understand the business domain in which I am functioning. I better know, too, the sourcing, the management of any of the other elements that come into my organization. However, most organizations today have a workforce that runs 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 generations. Now, if you got somebody old like me, see, Greg? Old. You come in, I'm not trying to be a traditionalist, but you got to think from left. And when they look at cyber, there is fear. A little bit of anger because it has, for some, dispossessed them from positions, moved them out. So you've got the traditionalist, probably within an office, all the way to Generation Z. And the way a young person, 19 years old, looks at a cyber attack on their account is totally different than the way I do. Me, shiver, fear, oh my gosh, they got into my bank account. Yeah, well, it was a chance I took. Okay, so what do we do? If that same person is designing the response that an organization has to have, they're not going to put in 18 different kinds of checks and balances and little gates that I would, that would, one, slow down the process, annoy every young person who wants that data to flow, and that stream of anything else to come through. But I'm going to feel secure because my data is safe. And you'll go to somebody else, to another company. Right now, we have to realize the Generation Y, Generation Z are going to be the ones who will design the changes. They will design all of the systems to control so that those breaches don't occur. I have to say that because I'm not. My granddaughter is. His son. My daughter. I said to my daughter, she's 23. Don't hate her, she's a lawyer. But I said, she was doing something on it, and I said, aren't you afraid that if you put that data in an email to somebody, somebody could breach it? She said, nah. They could go in 8 different places and get the same data and more. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So, it was not that she was nonchalant. She said, I'm careful about what I do and don't do. She has a security clearance. So she's careful to a degree. But she accepts the risk. And her risk avoidance, her risk aversion is so much higher than mine. And if I'm management, looking at the plans that you are putting together to help our company move forward, to protect us from whatever the invasion may be, because that's how the old guys look at it, it's an invasion. You're going to have a totally different look at it, different take, and a different response. My response to your plan will be triggered by my experience base. And what we have to do is look at Generation X. At 1.44 is the billion, is the number of people. Generation X, 1.72. Y. Generation Z, 2.52 billion people. You guys are the ones who will be in charge later. So keep the freedom of thought that you have now, and you become us. Because remember, there will be someone young who will come through and have a totally different attitude than you're managing. What we have to do is give the workforce a resilience. And that's where I, as a scientist, come in. Because I want to look at how do we build in that resilience. You, today, how many of you, your whole life, you have been digitally connected? Either cell phone or laptop, your whole life, right? I won't tell you how old I was. You'll get a little wheelchair and pull me up. But to you, this is your way of life. And you don't even think about staying in a job 15, 20 years, retiring from the same job you started when you graduated. Oh, please. Even I don't want to do that. So I know you want. And my daughter, my son, it's not in their frame of thinking. You're natural entrepreneurs. You look at the framework. You say, I have the capability to function not within 4 walls. I can usually function in whatever job I have from wherever I am and do an excellent job. And so what we as management have to do is capture that. And we have to explore all of the learning environments through which you perform at your best and incorporate that into all of the solutions that we have for our ICT problems, our workforce problems. These are what we see for, well, it's a picture of Australian workforce, but it's a global young people. You're creative. You have an entrepreneurial spirit. But most of all, you have a social responsibility. You're not just doing things to do. Most of you do, yes, you do things for a living, but you want to know what is the difference on you. And I think that's one of those things that we, in our old age, have to appreciate. You don't want to just be the cog. You want to be part of the answer. So these are the kinds of things we have to look for as we, the scientists, try to design methodologies and tools to study so that we're not caught the old management when you turn into management. We hope to give you tools so that you can look to these type of factors. These are what we call variables when you put together an algorithm. And this is what we would look at to say, what's going to happen in the future? How can we anticipate the characteristics of the next generation? These are the kinds of things that we want to be able to happen. We want to be able to leverage not only your individual capabilities, but your group connections. Use it to the advantage, not only of you, but to whatever you're working for. How that everybody is actually a cyber employee. It's no longer, as I said, just when you and I in that slot. If you're connected to the internet, you are a cyber employee. And it's not going to happen if there's not collaboration between workforce and management. And there has to be exchange. And one of the things that I think we definitely have to do is find out how to stress this workforce infrastructure under controlled environments. Because if you're not, if you don't do it under a controlled environment, what we do is we get someone who, like a Chelsea man, or an Eric Sweeney, they were not in what you would call ICT positions. They had access to information. They also felt a moral responsibility, a social responsibility, and they, within their minds, made decisions that affected not just them and not just their one organization. But I can tell you, I know they affected a lot of people's lives. But in the moment they made the decision, they felt right. So what we have to do is balance all of these from a management perspective and from a workforce. And they have to work together. So what we are proposing is that we look at it again, the scientist in me says, take it from each of the areas where you can study. Begin when they're young, when people are young, and help them understand that when you are that individual behind the keyboard. My granddaughter, 3 years old, took my phone, this was before I had one, she could swipe. And she picked it up and she was trying to swipe and move things, and she threw it. Gumpy. That's what they call it. Gumpy. Gumpy, your phone's for. Ah, no, it's not. Mine's older. It's older than your mother's. She felt it was no better. What we have to do is teach, but she has a comfort with the digital environment. And we have to hone that environment, understand how she's interacting with it, not tell her what to do, but identify how she's interacting, capturing that, and using that to determine what are some of the variables and characteristics as she's growing into generation next, the ones you will have to manage. We also have to understand that to function in this world, because remember, it's Mark Zuckerberg, I don't believe finished college. So for you to function and to head any organization as an entrepreneur, you do not have to go to get a master's degree. But you have to have some instruction, and in that instruction, at the technical level, what we can do is identify how you're interacting. What is it you're expecting from, as an end result? And what are the resources that you need, but also how you're going to manage, and who are the people you're going to manage, and what you expect from them. But if you're an employee, what do you want back from that management while you're there? For those who do try to pursue, say, a bachelor's or an advanced degree, I want to use them to help to do the study, to understand that, to capture our data, so that we can look at that long-range world, to give you as a manager, when you become managers, to give you that data so that you function appropriately with your employees. with yourself, with that environment. And if you're a subcontractor with any of your primes, or if you have a subcontractor, how do you interact with them? So that, one, your data stays secure, their people feel that they are appropriately heard, and that the environment itself stays as safe as possible, given the risk we're all willing to take. Because the risk my subcontractor takes can't be more than the one I'm willing to on prime. We all have to work together. So, that's about it for me. I wanted to leave you with loads of food for thought. I know that when you go to your classes, or when you go to your computer next time, or your phone, because remember, for you, being connected to the internet is just everything. Connected to data is a way of life. It's a friend. But when you do that, I want you to make sure you're looking at it from the broader perspective. I want you to step back, and every once in a while for the rest of the day, just look at it and ask yourself some of those same questions. Thank you.
We have a little bit of time for some Q&A. So anybody have any question or anything you'd like to ask of them? Any questions you have regarding what we're doing at the center? We've got just a couple minutes before we need to wrap up. So anybody?
You all want to go home? Oh, come on.
By show of hands, how many of you are in ICT-related roles right now, or at least planning to be in them? Most of the room? I was expecting most hands to go up. How many of you are in information or data security? Anybody? Anybody interested in that? We are at the center. We're going to be having at the latter part of June another very intensive session where we're going to be going through a number of things, both commercially and at the defense level, around infrastructure, data, and critical system security. And so you want to stay tuned to that. It's coming up probably in late June, early July. So make sure that you stay on top of that, and it will be down at the Fairfield campus. So make sure that you keep abreast of those developments. And in the meantime, any questions you have, please feel free to reach out. But let's take one more moment. Join me in thanking Mark and Denise for their presentation. Both of their first days off the plane, first days in Australia, first days in Melbourne, and early morning navigating their way through Melbourne. So thank you all for coming. Thank you guys for being here. And once again, stay in touch. We'll look forward to seeing you a lot more down the road. Thanks.